HG Padmalocan, Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada ki, Namacharya Haridasa Go ki, Peshi Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha, Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda, Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath, Radhakun Shankun Giri Govardhan ki, Vrindavan Dham ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Jagannath Puri Dham ki, New Govardhan ki, Tulsi Devi ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Gaura Pramanande, oh glorious Visible devotees, oh glorious Visible devotees, oh glorious Visible devotees, oh glorious Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 16. Britya prashabim mukam drigasabam. Prashana hasaruna lochananam. Kiritnam kundalinam chatubhujam. Idam sukam vakashi sakshitam shriya. Britya prasara bimukam drigasabam. Prashana asaruna lochananam. Kiritinam kundalinam chatubhujam. Idam sukam vakshashi sakshitam shriya. Word for word, Britya, Reservator, prasada, affection, abhimukam, favorably facing, drik, the very sight, asavam, an intoxication, prashana, very much pleased, hasa, smile, aruna, reddish, lochana, eyes, ananam, face, kiritatam, with helmet, kundalinam, with earrings, chatu bhujam, with 4 hands, pitta, yellow, shukam, dress, vakshashi, on the chest, lashitam, marked, shriya, with the goddess of fortune. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki. The personality of Godhead, seen leaning favorably towards his loving servitors, his very sight intoxicating and attractive, appeared to be very much satisfied. He had a smiling face decorated with an enchanting reddish hue. He was dressed in yellow robes and wore earrings and a helmet on his head. He had 4 hands, and his chest was marked with the lines of the goddess of fortune. Purport. In the Padma Purana, the Uttarakhanda, there is a full description of the yoga pit, of the particular place where the Lord is in audience to his eternal devotees. In that yoga pit, the personifications of religion, knowledge, opulence, and renunciation are all seated at the lotus feet of the Lord. The 4 Vedas, namely the Rit, the Sama, the Yajur, and the Atharva, are present there personally to advise the Lord. The 16 energies headed by the Chanda are all present there. Chanda and Kumuda are the first 2 doorkeepers. In the middle door are the doorkeepers named Bhadra and Subhadra. And at the last door are Jaya and Vijay. There are other doorkeepers also named Kumuda, Kumudaksha, Pundrika, Vamana, Sankhukana, Savanetsha, Sumukha, etc. The Lord's palace is well decorated and protected by the above mentioned doorkeepers. First of all, I'd like to offer my obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, my spiritual master, and ask for the blessings of the Sini devotees that I may see something of use in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm a bit of a grey cloud, but I'm sure the Bhagavatam will shine through. It's also Bhishmashtami today, so I'll give a small talk on the verse, and I'll be talking about Bhishma Day for the remainder of the class. Okay, I'll keep that open. First of all, I just wanted to touch on the importance of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I've been working with KK a lot lately, for the last 4 months, and he always expresses to me his thoughts and feelings on the Srimad Bhagavatam and how important it is to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam, along with the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, is very purifying to the heart, and hearing the Bhagavatam and chanting every day is the fast road back to Godhead. There are distractions within the material world. There is an example of we're always trying to hear, we're always trying to chant, but sometimes we get distracted and that becomes difficult. It's like sometimes we see a mother, they bring their little child into a class and they start to lose attention in class and they start to play up and they start to make some noise. And the mum comes and grabs that child, like Savannah will do in the future with Uma, when she starts to play up in class, and that child gets removed from class when they start to lose attention. So that's like us in our spiritual life. It can be very difficult at times to keep our attention and our focus on what's important in our spiritual life, especially hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting. So when we do lose our attention and when we start to drift away a little bit, just as the mother drags that child out of the class, material nature will drag us away from spiritual life. It's very strong, just like the parents of a little child inside a temple room. So the modes are very strong. There's many difficulties we have to overcome within the material world. But if we anchor our spiritual life to the Srimad Bhagavatam and the chanting of a Hare Krishna mantra, it will be our boat across this ocean of material suffering. So very important to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So I just wanted to mention that at the beginning of the class. It's good to remind, I'm mostly reminding myself. So in this verse we're hearing about the kingdom of God, the nature of the atmosphere, the devotees, the inhabitants. And I was listening, just look on my eye. I feel like falling off everywhere. Little flakes rolling down my face. I was listening to Srila Prabhupada. He gave a little bit of a talk on this class, and he started with realizing God. It begins with the name, so that therefore we're chanting the name. At the moment, while I'm speaking for myself, the heart's very impure, so it's very difficult to understand Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes. Sometimes very difficult to understand what's in him. But by following the process that has been laid out before us by the previous acharyas, one can come to the understanding of Krishna's name, qualities, and pastimes. I myself, I still find it quite difficult. I don't have much love in my heart for Krishna. I'm still working on that, building a relationship with Krishna. But I have an immense love for Srila Prabhupada. And I know by following Srila Prabhupada's instructions and the previous acharyas, they will eventually lead me to that love which we're all looking for with Krishna. So we're very fortunate to have these previous acharyas giving us the information we need to step towards Krishna. There's a verse in the Isha Upanishad which talks about the importance of knowing Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes. Mantra 14 said that one should know Krishna perfectly, his name, form, qualities, and pastimes, as well as his temporary material creation. When one knows this as a passes death and the ephemeral cosmic manifestation with it, and enters into the eternal kingdom of God to enjoy his eternal life of bliss and knowledge. So it's very important to know these aspects of Krishna. And we get that through the Srimad Bhagavatam and the mercy of the previous acharyas. Krishna is described as nirguna. So nirguna means he has no material qualities. So he has no material qualities, but he has qualities. And he's Bhakta Vatsala. So he's very much inclined to the favour of his devotees. And we've seen that in this verse, how much he was smiling upon the devotees there. We see in this world, the master and servant relationship is much different than the spiritual world. In the material world, the masters are just lording it over the servants, and the servants are just doing anything to get something out of the master. But it's not like that with the relationship between Krishna and his devotees. Krishna's got everything he needs. Krishna doesn't need anything. He's fully satisfied. But there's millions of devotees, servants there in the spiritual world who are eager to serve him. It's stated that in Vaikuntha world, everything's clean, but they're still sweeping just because they want to serve Krishna, so that's a very beautiful thing. There's another word in this verse, Drig Asavam. Asavam means intoxication. It's describing how Krishna's looking at the devotees, It's kind of when someone's a bit intoxicated, they've got that like half smile and their eyes are a bit, it's like a very nice, beautiful look, and that means that Krishna's pleased. So that's very sweet. So yeah, like I said, here in the material world, service means neither master or servant. It just means service to the senses. Yeah, much more different in the material world. Yeah, everyone's just trying to get something here within the material world. So yeah, it's an awkward position here in the material world. And we even see people who try to do good within the material world, people who try to execute some nice service within the material world, it normally turns around and bites them on the backside. We've had Mahatma Gandhi, we all know Mahatma Gandhi in India. He thought he was doing great, he thought he was really stepping forward for a good cause, but in the end, he got shot. And that's the nature of the material world. You can do this service, but in the end, there's going to be people who aren't happy with that. That Krishna's always happy with our service. So because time is short, I wanted to speak on Bhishma Dev today. I just want to touch on a few points from that verse. Bhishma Dev, before he was known as Bhishma Dev, was Pitamaha Gangaputra. So I was going to talk about his birth and how it all came about, the Bhishma Dev story. So Bhishma Dev's appearance is quite fascinating. There was once a big fire yajna taking place in Satya Loka, so the abode of Lord Brahma, and all the demigods were there. I'm not too sure if they were all there. I think there's like 330 million demigods in each Brahmananda, so that would be a big fire yajna. Imagine Nishinakavacha doing a fire yajna that big. So all the demigods were there, and Mother Ganga was there at this big fire yajna. And across from her was a demigod called Mahavishek. And while this fire yajna was taking place, these two started to fall for each other from either side of the space. But we know Lord Brahma, he's got 4 heads. So he knows everything what's going on. He's got eyes going everywhere. So he's seen these two slowly looking deeply into each other's eyes and becoming entangled with love. We can see that here sometimes at the farm, over at the Prasadam Hall. So they're falling in love, and Lord Brahma, he pulls them up, and he says to them, "This is a big important fire yajna. We don't need this kind of thing going on here. So I curse you both. I curse you both that you will take birth on planet Earth." And he was quite merciful. He gave Mahavishek an option where to take his birth. So then they appeared on Earth. He appeared as Shantanu, and she came as obviously Mother Ganga personified. So it was later down the track in his life, and they met once again on planet Earth to continue this love story. And at first sight of Ganga, Shantanu was completely in love. He was thinking, "This is my wife. This is the one that I want to marry." And he asked her, "Will you become my wife?" And she said, "Yes, but there's a few causes which I want to throw into this. You can never question anything that I do, and you can never talk to me abruptly." So he agreed. He was just so in love. He's like, "Yeah, let's do that." So everything's going all cherry bright, all very good. And the first child appears. And Ganga grabs that child, walks straight to the Ganges, gets that child, bloop, throws the child away. And Shantanu, he's there in amazement. Like, what is she doing? But he can't say anything. He said he wouldn't say anything. Okay, I'll just let that slide. He's confused. Second child. She grabs the second child. She walks past. What is she thinking? Goes to the Ganges. Bloop! Again, another child. Taken. Third child. Bloop! Fourth child. Bloop! Fifth child. Bloop! Sixth child. Bloop! Seventh child. Bloop! Or into the Ganges. She's pregnant again with the 8th child. And he's really confused and bewildered. What is she doing? She's got the child in her hands and she's walking to do this same thing to the 8th child. And Shantanu, he's had enough. She's walking past and he's just like, you can't do this anymore. You're crazy. No way I'm going to let this happen. I'm stopping this time. No way you're going to take my 8th child. She's like, okay, but you made a promise. If you ever spoke to me in a certain way and interfered with the certain activities or things that I was doing, I would leave you. So I'm going to leave you right now. And he's heartbroken. And then she goes on to tell him this story about why she did what she did. So she goes on to explain why she drowned the first 7 children. So there was a great Muni, Vasishta Muni, and he had a great cow, which many people were chasing, a Sarabi cow, had certain milk which would give some eternal life. Lord Indra has also tried to steal this cow. And there was a line of demigods called the Vasus. There was 8, and they were hatching this plan how to steal this Sarabi cow. And there was one Vasu in particular who was behind all of the scheme. So it came to the day when they were going to steal the cow. And Vasishta Muni, he awoke when they were there, and he seen what they were doing. And more cursing was done. He cursed them all to take short lives on earth. But there was one in particular who he cursed to live a long life on earth. And that was the 8th child. So he explained that there was just a short period for those 7 Vasus prior to him. They just had that short little curse to live out. But who would become Bhishmadev, he was cursed to live a long life. And he was the one who was saved. So they're there standing there. He's amazed by the stories he's heard. And he's thinking, and he's thinking, well, he may as well go with you to the celestial planets to get great training. So there he goes off with Ganga to the celestial realm. And it's told that he gets great training by all these amazing rishis. And he gets military training, military warfare by no other than Parashuram. So many years go past, 32 years, if I'm correct, 32 years go past. the Ganges is starting to move in a very interesting way. And his dad comes out and he's thinking, what's going on here? And there's all arrows in Mother Ganga and the river's flowing in this very interesting way. And he spots this very beautiful, handsome man shooting arrows. Then he disappears. Then he's praying to Mother Ganga, who is this personality? Then it's revealed to him that his personality is actually his son. He's all grown up now, he's a beautiful young man. He's got all this knowledge, he's trained in military warfare. And his dad is so excited to see his dear son. So he's back now. And he's a very special personality, known now as Deva Plata. And once he got back and returned, his life is quite amazing. And it's a quality which is like a jewel within the Vaishnava. And that jewel is sacrifice. So when I think of Bhishmadev, I think of sacrifice. His whole life was just a life of sacrifice, like 4 generations. Especially starting out with his dad, was then looking for a new wife. And he met, his eyes drifted towards this very young lady. She was a daughter of a fisherman, Satyavati. And he went to try to gain her hand in marriage. But he wouldn't give the hand in marriage. He said, look, you've already got this amazing son. He's going to get the throne, the Guru dynasty. I want my grandson to get that throne. So he went away very disappointed. He was very sad, and Bhishmadev caught track of this. And Bhishmadev went there. And they explained what had just happened. This was one of the beginning of Bhishmadev's great sacrifices. He was there, and they were explaining what happened. How that their son wouldn't get the throne because he was in line for the throne. Or his child would get the throne. Then he made the vow that I would remain brahmachari for the remainder of my life. And whoever sits on that throne, I will always protect and look over. And when he made that vow, I will be brahmachari for the remainder of my life. A demigod showered flowers from the heavens. And the name came out, Bhishmadev, which means one who took a terrible vow. So this was the beginning of Bhishmadev's great sacrifices, and plenty more followed that. And when I was looking at this, I kind of thought of other great devotees who have sacrificed so much. We look at Prabhupada. A lot of people talk about the sacrifices that Srila Prabhupada has made. You know, it's a big sacrifice for Srila Prabhupada to leave Vrindavan, where he was staying, and come to New York at that time. It was a very dark, dingy, scary place. But not only did Srila Prabhupada come from Vrindavan here and go to New York, Srila Prabhupada came from the spiritual world to help us here. He sacrificed so much. We hear about Haridas Thakur, how much he sacrificed. We hear in other faiths, like Jesus Christ, how much he sacrificed for the Lord. So it's a real jewel within a devotee of the Lord. So we fast forward down the track, and there is great fighting within this family, going on for many, many years. And it finally ends up in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And this is very difficult for Bhishma Dev. He's like the loving grandfather of both the Kurus and the Pandavas. So it's breaking his heart that all this is going on. He's such a loving personality, and it's tearing him apart. We hear at one stage when Dronacharya tried to burn down the Pandavas in that house in the forest, and that village family was in there instead. And the report went back that it was actually the Pandavas. And that just tore Bhishma Dev apart. It just shows how much he loved them. So down the track we end up on the battlefield. And it's so hard for Bhishma Dev. He took that vow that he would always protect the one who was on the throne. But it was tearing him apart. You had one side who was, evil. And you had Yudhisthira, who was all about peace. You had one side, Dronacharya, who was hatred, and Yudhisthira, who was love. And no one knew more than Bhishma Dev. He knew what Dronacharya was all about. So it was very difficult for him. So we're on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and Bhishma Dev is fighting the opposite side to Krishna. But Bhishma Dev wanted to show the world the greatness of Krishna, but he is willing to break his own promise, to protect the promise of his devotee. So Bhishma was about to kill Arjuna. Then Krishna stepped in, and Krishna, before the battle started, he said, I wasn't going to get involved in this fight. But Krishna stepped in, and he said he picked up the chariot wheel, and his eyes were like red hot coal. And he went to throw this wheel. And that's all Bhishma Dev wanted. He wanted to show the world how much Krishna loves his devotees. It's a real beautiful thing. Then Bhishma Dev was attacking Krishna. He was shooting arrows at Krishna. And he said that these arrows were like offerings to Krishna, like flowers shooting at Krishna. Srila Prabhupada described in one of his classes that just like a lover, if I went for someone and just bit them on the neck, I'd be like, whoa, what are you doing? It would hurt. But if a lover done that, it's completely different. And that's how Srila Prabhupada described that. So he's shooting these arrows at Krishna, but they're actually offerings, like flower petals, just like how we offer flower petals to Krishna. Really amazing. So this was Bhishma Dev, sacrificed so much of his life and was continuously always trying to glorify and show Krishna's love. Then it got to the end of his life, and Bhishma Dev is laying there. He said he's remembering the gopis. Krishna's there, the devotees around him. His eyes are fixed on the Lord. He's remembering all the name, the form, the qualities of Krishna. And then he slowly leaves his body. And it says that in the Bhagavad Gita, that at the time of death, Whatever we remember, we will achieve without fail. And one who remembers me at the time of death will attain me. And that's the Lord's promise, as states in the Bhagavad Gita. So that's a little short passage of Bhishma Dev in a nutshell. But yeah, the main thing that just stands out for me with Bhishma Dev is just how much he sacrificed, and shows that if you're willing to sacrifice for Krishna, Krishna will always be there for you. And when it comes time for us to leave our bodies, we can have a similar passing to Bhishma Dev with our mind and eyes on Krishna. And at the end of the day, that's the perfection of life. So we should always remember these pastimes of Krishna and Krishna's devotees. And we always talk about these pastimes within circles of devotees, as they help purify our mind, our hearts, and help us on our journey back to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada would often say that his Krishna consciousness is the perfection of life. So to always engage our mind and our activities in his Krishna consciousness, we'll get the ultimate reward, which is Krishna. So I'll end there today. If anyone's got any questions or corrections, comments.
You mentioned that when we surrender to Krishna, then He'll take care of us. So, what is the healthy way of approaching this? Because everyone's on a different level. Because when I was I'll just give the context of it. When I was in Auckland, I remember one devotee said, "Oh, I joined in the 80s and I gave my whole life, and now what do I have to show for it? I gave up my education, and or sometimes some devotees might say I gave up my job, and then kind of have appears to be kind of like materially they're struggling, and appears that they're kind of resentful that they sacrifice. So what's the healthy way of knowing at what level we are and how gradually surrender? How do we assess that? So we don't become resentful and bitter and things like that.
Yeah, I think we can only do as much as we can do. We can't overshoot. I think that's a problem which some people have. They may come into the movement, or they may be practicing Krishna consciousness, and they may have a very high standard or a very high goal, and they may miss that, or they may fry themselves out by trying to reach that. So I always say we should just always set little goals within Krishna consciousness, and always just follow the basics of Krishna consciousness. I said in a class one day that I used to play rugby league, and the coach would always talk to us in the sheds before the game, and he would say, you just go out there and just stick to the game plan and get the basics right. Don't you try to do anything fancy, don't try to do anything special, just stick to the structure. So I find Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas, they've given us the perfect mix for us to advance in Krishna consciousness gradually. So that's all we've got to do. We've just got to get the basics down. We don't have to really extend ourselves. It is good to push the envelope at times, but we just have to get the basics down. And I think when we get the basics down, we become steady within our Krishna consciousness. And when one's steady, they don't really look back and, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that, because they're just happy where they are, because one who's steady is happy where they are in Krishna consciousness. So yeah, it's just really important to be steady in Krishna consciousness. Stick to the basics. You don't have to go off and do all these fancy side things. You chant, you listen to Bhagavatam, There's so many great devotees on this farm who we can get our association from. And just by doing this day in, day out, you make progress. It's slow, but after many, many years, that's a lot. And like I said, when you're steady, after many, many years, you're just content. And someone who's content, they're not going to look back and, I should have done this and I shouldn't have done that. The mature world can be a very difficult place to be in. And when one's not steady within Krishna consciousness, within God consciousness, the mature world can be a very bewildering place. It can seem like, why am I getting all this suffering? Why am I getting all this misery? There was a class in the early 1900s and someone, 1920 or something like this, and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he was given a class, and one of his disciples put up his hand at the end of the class and they said, Gurudev, why is there so much misery in this world? And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he quoted Krishna. He said, look, I put so much difficulties, what were the words? Difficulties, pain. There was a few others which he mentioned, but these difficulties within the material world. But it's not to torment you. It's so that the living entity looks for a happiness which is eternally joyful, and they look for a joy which is eternally, eternally adorable. So there's going to be these difficulties in life, even when we get further down the track, but we always have to see that even when we're going through these difficulties in life, that Krishna's hand's in there, and it's for our benefit. But once again, it comes down to steadiness. One who's steady in Krishna consciousness, they can see these kind of reversals and so forth happening in their life. So when they do happen, they can see the clearer picture. So yeah, that stops resentment. The basics? Definitely, like I mentioned at the start of the class, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing is so important. We've got this human form of life, 8,400,000 forms of species, and we've got this human form of life, so we're very fortunate. We've got the intelligence to understand these topics, to understand this Krishna consciousness. So we should take full advantage of that. So hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing from other devotees, then hearing the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is very important. And the association with devotees is very important. We're very fortunate that we live in a community where everywhere you look, every door you walk out of, every road you walk down, you're crossing paths with devotees. So we've got great opportunity here. And stick to the basics. And service, of course. Service is very purifying and gives us the tools to understand what we're going through, what we're experiencing.
Is it okay if I offer a glorification of Bhishma?
Yeah, of course.
So you were mentioning how Bhishma Dev was glorifying Krishna, but because of the reciprocal relationship, Krishna was also glorifying Bhishma Dev. So after the Battle of Kurukshetra, they all went back to Hastinapur. Yudhishthira was installed on the throne. But he was feeling really disturbed because of millions and millions of people being killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he was thinking, this is just to install me as the king. I'm so selfish, all these people have died on my account. And Vyasa was trying to convince him, Krishna was trying to convince him that this is not the case. This was a righteous war. So then it so happened that after some days, Arjuna came to Krishna's room, and Krishna was deep in meditation. So Arjuna, he was waiting for Krishna. And then when Krishna came to external consciousness, he said, my Lord, what are you meditating? I said, I'm thinking of Bhishma Dev, because he's about to depart. Because we know that Bhishma had this benediction that he could choose his time of departing. So he was waiting for the sun to move on the northern course, because it's stated in the Shastra that if you leave your body when the sun's on the southern course, you come back. But if you leave your body on the northern course, then it's more likely you'll go back to the spiritual realm. So anyhow, all the Pandavas, they went to the place where Bhishma was lying on the battlefield. And it describes how Krishna was on a bed of arrows. It's not like all the arrows were shot in the ground and he was lying down. It's not like that. It describes in the Mahabharata that these arrows were actually going right through his body. Because keep in mind that all these arrows were shot by Arjuna. He's very powerful warrior. It's not like they just stick in and that's it. No, they went right through his body. And it also mentions there were so many arrows you couldn't put two fingers between half of each arrow. So you can just imagine he's like a human pinprick. And he's lying there and maintaining his life through the prowess of his own, his own sort of potency. And then when the Pandavas were coming there, because the idea was that Yudhishthira was coming there to hear from Bhishmadeva so that he would understand that what he'd done was righteous. And all the sages in the universe heard this was going to happen. So it was the who's who of all the sages. There was Narada was there, Vyasa was there, Atri was there. Anyone you can think of who's a great sage was there to hear Vishnudev speak. Because not only was Vishnudev the grandsire of the Kuru dynasty and the greatest warrior that ever lived, he was also the greatest exponent of Dharma. And they knew he was going to depart, and this would be such a loss to the world. But they also knew that he was going to speak on Dharma. And so then Yudhishthira started asking questions, and then for I think it was 56 days, he's lying there on his bed of arrows, and he's just glorifying Krishna and glorifying Dharma for 56 days. And then finally, when the sun moved into its northern path, he fixed his mind upon Krishna and departed. So the idea was that Krishna could have convinced Yudhishthira it was okay what he did. But in order to glorify his devotee Vishnudev, he allowed him to do that.
Amazing. Good. Vishnudev ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.